everybody here a Lake Norman student? Are there students from other schools here?
We're
Any?
South Iredell.
South Iredell? Where else? Anybody else? Okay, everybody class of 2020?
2021.
2021, okay, good. Well, first of all, my name is Bill Kearney, and I'm a local financial advisor, but I've been doing college planning classes here at Lake Norman for about the past 5 years, and overall for Iredell Statesville School for the past 10 years. This is our 10th graduating class. And so we're going to talk tonight about college planning and what all that means and kind of what to prepare for. And we'll go through that. I conduct what I call financial literacy courses in the community, whether it's retirement courses, tax planning, all different subjects. This is the course we've been doing the longest, which is the college planning part. And there's a little bit more information about me inside your packets there as well if you want to read some more. But tonight is not about our company, it's not about our products or anything like that. Tonight is literally just about information. My goal is to get you as much college knowledge, as we call it, over the next hour to hour and 15 minutes as we possibly can, and hopefully answer some questions you might have related to college and your efforts there thus far. If you've thumbed through the packets at all, let me go through that real quick. Obviously, this is the packet we're going to go through tonight, and there's one activity in here, and there is, the only thing you need to leave with me is this last page. And at the very least, if you just fill out the top part of it at some time before you leave, because we need to have a record of who was here. We like to let the school know who came and all of that. One thing that usually or a lot of times comes out of this is people like to come in and talk to us one-on-one. So we offer free consultations to do that. And you'll see there's a gift certificate there to do that as well. And then your take-home kit has some other articles and things like that in here you might want to read related to financial aid and different topics such as that. So that's kind of your packet from there. And just so you guys know, this is a general presentation. I'm not giving anyone specific financial advice. However, if you learned something tonight that works really well and you'd like to give us credit for it, we'll be happy to take that. But otherwise, just a general presentation from here. As far as college is concerned, parents, how many of you attended a 4-year college or university? Okay, good amount of you. And how many of you, this is your first child going to college? Okay, so some of you have been through this before, and parents that haven't, what you're going to see tonight, I think, is how much this has changed since when you were looking at colleges. It's changed dramatically. And if there's one thing you walk away tonight learning or thinking about this whole process that I'd like you to take away, it's that college really is a business. It's become big business, and we're going to teach you tonight some of the kind of the tricks of the trade that they're using with students and families, and how maybe you can take advantage of some of those things that you learn. The class tonight is set up in 2 different pieces. One piece is called student positioning, so we're going to talk about standardized tests, college selection, college criteria, cost of schools, all sorts of information like that. And the second part is about financial aid. And we're going to talk about the financial aid system and how colleges are using that to leverage for the students that they actually want to attend their school. So we're going to go through all of that as well. And we're going to try and get through all of that in about an hour and 15 minutes. So like I said, I'm going to go quickly. And it may help, if you have questions, it might help inside your packet. There's a notes thing in there. Write your questions down. I'm probably going to cover what your question is at some point in the class, but if I don't, you can ask me afterwards as well. But that way I can get you guys out of here at a reasonable amount of time tonight as well. Okay, is that fair enough for everybody? Okay. That's about us. Kind of went through that. So again, I want to go through and kind of take you through the cost for college. I know that everyone in here is aware that college has become quite expensive. I want to show you how expensive it's become and how quickly that's happened. Standardized testing, college selection, some criteria selection you can use to help you find schools, what colleges are looking for and what they're doing in student selection, and then the admissions process. Now, by the way, while I'm going through this, if there's anything on here that you want to take a picture of, any slides you want to take a picture of, feel free to do that. This is your information. And there'll be a couple of slides. I know you're going to want to do that. I'm going to give you a timeline for success at the end as well. Now, the class is geared for juniors, but if you're a sophomore, this still works as well. You can start working on some of these things now that we talk about too. And then I've got a couple of case studies. I may only go through one tonight. to kind of show you how the financial aid system is working here. So cost of attendance has increased more than 400% in the last 35 years. 400%. If you put that up against the average income, has only increased about 147% over the same period of time. So if anybody feels like it's been kind of a struggle to keep up and save for school, it's because it has been. It's going up 6 to 10% in cost per year, and there doesn't ever seem to be a situation where that doesn't happen. When we have an economic downturn, cost of college goes up another 6%. It seems to be immune from anything that's going on in the economy at large. Right now, the average public university cost is $25,000, and the average private is about $45,000. You get to the elite schools, they're $60,000 to $70,000 a year now. So think about $25,000 a year. That's kind of like buying a new car every year for the next 4 years. Okay, so it's obviously expensive. Now, first question I want to ask you guys, see if anybody knows what this looks like. Does anybody know what, just take a guess at what the average graduation rate is right now, 4-year graduation rate for public university students? Don't be afraid. We gotta have to have audience participation. Somebody take a guess.
80%.
80%. Wow, that would be awesome. 50. Still too high.
65.
65. No, too high.
30.
Below 30.
Oh, 25.
25.
Yeah, gosh.
25%. So what that means is that if it's a 4-year program right now in the United States, only 25% of our students are staying on track and graduating on time in 4 years. Okay? That's not so great. Now, 2 years ago, I don't have the data yet for last year, but 2 years ago, the students who did graduate, whether it was in 4 years, 5 years, 6 years, or whatever, 80% of them moved back home after they graduated. So we're going to go through some things that you might want to start to think about and maybe potentially be asking when you go on a college visit to figure out what's going to happen for you. Let me give you another way to look at this. This is the tuition cost for Yale in 1970 versus 2014. I haven't updated it in a few years, but it still stands here. So $2,500 or so in 1970 was the tuition for Yale for a year. Okay? 2014 tuition was $45,800. Minimum wage was $1.45 back in 1970. It was $7.25. Has anybody done the math on that yet to figure out how many hours you have to work to pay that tuition? So, parents, did any of you work while you were in college? Maybe kind of work your way through a little bit? It's gone up so quickly, it's become almost impossible to do this. In addition, the way the financial aid system is set up now, if students work while they're in school and they earn enough money where they have to file a tax return, that information gets reported to the financial aid system, and if you're receiving financial aid, you can actually have it reduced because you're earning money from a part-time job. So it's made it almost impossible at this point to work your way through school, all right? But we're going to talk about some ways that maybe we look at this a little differently and attack the cost problem. And I'll tell you that the cost now that you're seeing, when you go and look online at schools and you see the costs, and you see, first of all, you might see tuition, and then you might see cost of attendance. Cost of attendance is always higher, right? It's because it includes everything. But what we've noticed and what we really believe now is that the cost of attendance figure is kind of like the sticker price when you're buying a car. We don't generally pay the sticker price, do we, when we buy a car? And what you'll find on college campuses is that what students are paying varies from student to student. Students don't pay the same amount, just like we don't pay the same amount for airline tickets or when you go buy a mattress, right? Everybody seems to pay a different amount. It's the same thing here as well. What you're going to see that's happening is the colleges are actually have increased their prices to a point where they can rebate for the students that they really want to come and attend their school, and they'll make the other students full pay. We're going to talk about how you figure out where you're going to be and what you're going to do to make sure you're in the right boat. We have a slide that we call the 2 boats. Okay? So I want to jump real quick just to standardized test. Students, have everybody taken an SAT? What happened with the ACT? That was supposed to happen a few weeks ago?
It's now Tuesday.
Tuesday.
Next week.
Okay. just beware the one they give in school. They've been doing this for about 5 years now. It doesn't generally go too well. It may not be the one that you want to report to the colleges, because what happens is everyone takes that test in junior year, right? And you may be in a classroom full of students where a portion of them aren't really interested in taking that test. And if you're here tonight, you're probably serious about this. So the environment that you're in when you're taking that test on Tuesday may not be the most ideal environment for taking that test. So if you don't get the best score on it, don't be discouraged. It's really been the data that we've seen over the last 4 or 5 years. In our profession and what we do counseling with students, we have a student positioning team, and our student positioning team focuses solely on that, on our students. And so a lot of the information I'm giving you tonight comes from what we've gathered in the field. One thing that our student positioning team would tell you is extremely important to do in junior year or earlier is, if you have the opportunity now, take both of these tests at least once. And it's not a situation where you need to put a ton of prep time in just yet, preparing for the test. What they would tell you to do is take both tests and then get a comparison chart where you can decipher the two differences in the scores to figure out if you're naturally better at one test versus the other. For example, if you're good in science, the ACT has a science section on it. So that might be a natural help to you in taking the test. The colleges will take either one of these at this point. So if you can figure out now which one you're better at and focus on that and then do your prep work from there, that might not be a bad plan. Okay? The other thing is, I put the websites on here. If you haven't registered, you can go on and register for those tests. College Board and ACT.org. Those are organizations that put on these tests nationally. And what you'll see on there are the national test dates. And those dates are important because these tests aren't given every single month going forward. They kind of alternate a little bit. So if you're working out a plan here on when you're going to take these and when you're going to do prep work, it might not be a bad idea to go on, take a look at those sites, and start to map out your plan. This is something that catches a lot of students, and all of a sudden you're in summertime trying to figure out when you're going to take the test, and it's a little difficult to do it that way. Okay? Does everybody know how super scoring works? SAT super scoring? Should I go through it, or do you want me to skip it? Let me go through it? Okay. So math, the way super scoring works, this is something SAT has done for a long time, and pretty much all of your colleges accept this, is the super scoring of the test, and it works kind of like this. Let's say you take the test the first time, you study, you get a 600 on the math and a 500 on the reading section. Okay, that is a 1100. So then you say, you know what, I'm going to go back, I'm going to really work hard on the reading section, and I'm going to try and get that score up. So you do, you spend all that time, you go back and you take the test again, and since you spent all that time in the reading, now your math score went down. So now what's our score? Actually, no. With super scoring, your first test you got a 600 on the math, second one you got a 600 on the critical reading. So the colleges will actually look at this and super score the two tests. So now you have 1200. Does anybody know why the colleges might do that?
To give benefit for the student?
That there is a benefit for that. Think of it this way. What if maybe during one of these tests you weren't feeling your best? Right? This would maybe help sort that out. Well, there's another reason too that has to do with colleges reporting. I don't have the book with me tonight, I don't think. Anybody looked online at college rankings? Maybe you're looking at engineering, or you're looking in some field and you're kind of trying to look at the schools and how they're ranked, and you can kind of see an average SAT score, right? Or ACT score. Well, in this case, if you don't really know how super scoring works, you'll see an average score, and it may list their average score at 1200 when really it's closer to 1100, right? Now, if a college's SAT score is 1200 average for what they accept versus 1100, which one seems a little bit more prestigious? 1200, right? Well, what can the colleges do if they appear to be a little bit more prestigious? They can charge more. See where that's going? So there's that involved in it too. So this is part of what they do in comparison to their competitors as well. So there are a number of different reasons why they do super scoring. Now ACT is a little different. You have to go on Google if you'd like to see if any of the schools you're looking at are doing super scoring, because they don't all do that. But there is a list on there, and they kind of taxi in and out of how they're going to do that. Okay, I know I'm going quickly, but I want to do this particular exercise here. Inside your packet, there is a criteria sheet. About halfway back, page 5. It says selection criteria. So, what I'd like everyone to do now, parents and students, is take a look at this list, kind of scan over it, and maybe put a mark by the criteria that is most important to you when looking for college. Take a couple minutes to do that. Anything jump off the page at you that's important? I see some circles. What do you guys got? What's important?
Well, she's just a freshman.
That's
But
okay.
Her sister's a junior. so-
Okay. What do you have?
All of them?
All of them are good, yeah. But anything particular?
Wherever it is, doesn't matter.
Somebody give me something that's important to you. What do you got?
International Baccalaureate credit.
IB credit, are you in an IB program?
Yeah.
That's kind of important, isn't it?
Yeah, we're
Yeah.
doing
Do all that work, and if you get to college and they won't take it, that's not a good thing.
Right.
Okay. What else? So kind of figuring out what credit the college will give you for your high school work. That's kind of important. What else? Somebody call something out.
Cost.
Cost, there it is. Good, yes, it's important.
Placement record.
Ooh, okay. Placement record. What's placement record?
Employment, the companies who come on campus
Yeah.
for selection.
I was going to ask which one is my favorite, but you guessed it. Now, why is placement record? I think they're all important, by the way. Everything on there is important. But why is placement record so important?
Because there's no use in getting a degree if you can't get a job.
That's interesting, isn't it? You guys came in a few minutes late. I don't know if you heard the part where I was talking about the cost of school, the graduation rate, and the percentage of students who are moving back home. So that has to do with placement record, right? Some of that? And so maybe one piece of criteria, at least from a business perspective, if you're treating this like a business relationship, maybe you try to find out the schools you're looking at, what their placement record is. And it's not just employment, it's also grad school within 6 months. Okay, so you can go on to further education. So let me give you an example of where placement record works really, really well. Anybody here from Delaware or attend the University of Delaware? You know somebody from Delaware?
Yeah, it needs.
Do you know, it's not part of why I'm doing this, but do you know what the mascot is of the University of Delaware? Totally random, useless knowledge.
No, I don't.
Blue hens.
Yes.
It's not the point of the story. But the university, maybe this is why people don't look at Delaware, because their mascot is the Blue Hens. I don't know, but the University of Delaware has, inside of their staff, they have a group of people, and their job is to take their senior class, take their information, and match them up with Fortune 500 companies to get them interviews.
Really?
How cool is that, right? Now, they have if not one of the highest placement records of any public university in the country. So maybe we might add Delaware to the list, right? Or maybe not, but the point is, at least maybe you'll start to think of it that way. But the point is, what are you getting for your money? right? If you're gonna spend 25 grand a year or more, what's the result going to be? What is the college doing to help you? What is the value of that money besides just the education? Does that make sense? That's the business part, at least that's the way I think about it from a business standpoint. Pretty much all these schools you're going to be looking at are good schools. You'll get a good education at them. But it's a matter of what is the result of all that after 4 years. You know, think of it this way. If only 25% are graduating on time in 4 years, that's basically like the back 2 tables there stay on track and graduate on time, and the rest, everybody else is at least 4.5, 5, 6 years. Okay? That includes if it's a 5-year program not graduating on time. Okay? So this is a really, really important part of it. And if you have multiple children, trying to figure out and keep them on track is a big part of what you're probably going to want to do here. So again, I think all this criteria is important. But I also think the placement record and the value you're getting for the school might be a place that you'll start. Now I can tell you, I want to give you an example of what we hear and what our student positioners that do interviews with students and parents hear related to criteria questions, because they do interviews. So when they ask students, you know, why are you thinking about attending that school? What's the situation there? They'll hear things like this. Right? That's kind of like the way the list goes sometimes. Now the good news with that is that parents, their criteria generally is in alignment with this, right? It's what's on parents' minds?
No.
No, it kind of looks like this. Okay? So, this is the kind of thing, conversation-wise, it's kind of in the background, at least that we found with students and parents, right? There's a big difference here. Now, one thing I know you guys, especially parents, you know for sure, is that time is going by quickly. We are now in March of junior year. When you hit August, colleges are starting to accept applications in August now at this point. So I don't know where you are in your college search process, but there's a lot of work probably to be done. And just yesterday, your kids were like right here, right? They were down here at your side, and now, so junior year is going to be done pretty quickly, and then we're into senior year. And the trick with a lot of this is you cannot go back and do this over again. You get one shot to go through it the right way, okay? So here's what, I want to give you an example of if you don't know where to start at all, this might be something that you are shooting for between now and the end of, say, summertime. What if instead of all that mess that we just looked at, your student came to you and said, Mom and Dad, I'm working toward the goal of acceptance by the University of, you can plug any one of them in. I happen to go to Tennessee, so we're going to use that one, okay? Tennessee is well known for its award-winning faculty. UT is credited for being one of the best universities at which to study engineering. And by the way, Mom and Dad, they offer one of the best financial aid packages in comparison to their competitors. Parents, who would like to hear something like that? Is that a little bit better than boyfriend, girlfriend, and all my friends? A little bit. Now, here's the point. If you look at this, and you break it apart, I'm working toward the goal. That means some research was done here. You can't just have a goal if you don't research what your goals are going to be, right? The reason that I have this goal is because Tennessee is good at this. And they have the degree field that I think I want to go into. And they're good at that part too. And guess what? Because of the way I am as a student, academically, I think they might actually compete for me as a student. They might actually reduce their costs. Okay? So if we're here tonight on March the 5th, this is kind of where you want to be by August. This is what you'd like to hear. All right, so how do you do that? Where do you begin? I don't know what the situation is. I've heard from some students that there are some career aptitude type testing things that happen in high school here or at South. Anything like that?
Yeah.
You've done some things like that? That's a really good place to start. And what you're trying to figure out with that is not exactly what you're going to do for the next 40 years, but maybe let it give you some information on what people like you typically end up doing and are happy doing. And maybe some backup plans as well, right? Something that tests your interest, your values, your skills, and your personality. That's the kind of thing you're looking for. That way you kind of get an idea, okay, the way I'm wired, people like me typically do this, or tend to do something like this. Because if you do that, then you can come up with the major fields that you might need in college. And ultimately, if you can figure out what your major is going to be, or something close to it, you can start to put together a list of schools. Now, this list here is a color-coded list. It's a system that we use to do this. And I wanted to show, you don't have to be able to read the schools or see everything that's on here. Just look at the colors. What you're looking at here is a student who, if you see the blue and the green, that means this student with those particular schools, if you take the, in this case, the SAT score, is in the top 25% based on what that school took last year. All right? Yellow and orange mean you're closer to middle of the pack, maybe bottom 25%. None of that is saying whether or not you're going to get into the school. We're talking now about the competitive nature of your application process. Does that make sense to everybody? So what you might end up with is maybe 2 or 3 schools from the blue and green area, and maybe 2 or 3 from the yellow and orange. And we're going to talk about how if you do that, if you have something like that, you might be able to use it to your advantage in financial aid later on in the process, okay? But maybe something like this. You don't have to color code it, but this is what you want a process to look like from there. And our team would tell you, you want no less than 6 and no more than 10 schools. No less than 6, no more than 10. And I'll explain a little bit more about that in the financial aid process. So once you have your list and you are maybe laying out what your visits are going to look like, you might start to formulate some questions that you want to ask. And I think these questions here are a good start. I also think they're business type questions that you would be interviewing in college for. For example, what criteria for admissions is most important at this school? If you were to ask an admissions officer that question, what do you think you could do with the answer?
Manipulate responses and content that you're delivering to them.
Exactly. You could maybe use it on your application.
Yeah.
Right? They told you what type of student does well here, right? And then you're sending in your application, I'm that type of student. That's a good one to ask. How many of your students graduate on time or in 4 years? We've talked about that. A lot of that information is available. If the graduation rate isn't good, it's hard to find it, or harder to find it. But it would be good to know what that is. And it would also be good to know if they have any programs to help keep students on track while they're in school for that purpose. How many students don't come back after freshman year? That's kind of important, right? If you think about it, you're asking them, what type of students are you accepting at this school? Are we casting a really, really wide net? How many students apply each year to the school and how many are accepted? How selective are you? And what is your enrollment yield? Enrollment yield simply means of the students that you accept, how many of them actually come here? If you start thinking that way about the questions you might ask when you go on a visit, because think about it, has anybody been on a college visit recently? They roll out the red carpet, don't they, when you go do a tour? I mean, they have the best marketing possible. And they put you inside of their bubble, and they control the information in there. But you need to go on campus, and you really need to get this kind of information. And think if you went to visit 6 or 7 schools, and you had the answers to these questions from all of those schools, and then you could put them side by side. That'd be kind of interesting to see what that looks like, right? Okay. So, again, we're going through our admissions process and our selection pretty quickly, but I want to get to some of the financial part of this as well. By the way, once you start to outline what schools you're going to apply to, you better get organized, because colleges all believe that they're unique and special, which means they all have different dates and deadlines that you have to follow, and they all have different requirements that they need from you. Follow all of their requirements. If something says it's optional, that means it's not optional. Generally, that's a test, okay? If they tell you to not do something, don't do it. Like if they say don't submit letters of recommendation, don't send them 3 letters of recommendation. That's not going to help you. Okay, so be careful. Listen to the way they're wording things. And send thank you letters. one of the things we recommend our students do, and I'd recommend everybody in here do, is when you start going on a visit, I would recommend you go in and find the admissions officer or the group or whoever that's responsible for your application when you turn it in. You get their business card, you go home, and you write a little thank you note and send it back to them. They actually keep those. I know an admissions officer at Davidson, they keep those. Now, what did you just do by doing that? It's a nice thing to do, but what did you just do?
Stood out.
Stood out a little bit, right? Think about it. When you go into this application process, there's tens of thousands of applications. And I'm sorry, guys, but there's thousands of kids who are going to look just like you. So start thinking about ways to maybe differentiate yourself. We're going to talk about student resumes in a little bit. That's another way to differentiate yourself. Anybody doing a resume in high school? Teachers making you do them? No? No one? Okay. I'm going to show you how to do that, or at least talk to you about it. All right, so we're going to jump into financial aid. And the purpose behind doing financial aid and student positioning is I want you to see how these two processes are interwoven together. We're going to get to FAFSA in a minute. So I'm going to pass some of these out now if we can, and just let you guys start to look through these. And if you would look through it and then just pass it back. So the deal with financial aid, and obviously our conversation tonight, we can talk about everybody's plans on how they plan on paying for school, or we can talk about using other people's money. Generally, everybody selects other people's money, right? Got it. By the way, when we talk about financial aid tonight, we are talking about something called institutional aid. This is not new. This has been around for years. The colleges actually have, if you collect everybody up, have about $30 billion allocated for something called institutional aid. That's literally an annual number, okay? The types of aid, grants and scholarships. Generally, grants are need-based, scholarships are merit-based. These are nice because they don't have to be paid back, and mom and dad, they don't count against your income. Federal work-study programs. You see these more often in graduate school, but we have seen some in undergrad. Money earned is applied toward tuition or living expenses. These also do not have to be paid back. And then student loans. Now, why would student loans be included in financial aid? Generally, if the college is offering you a student loan, the rates are a little bit better than what you can get on your own. So they consider that a type of aid. We talk in our program that we like to have some of those loans in the student's name if possible. And there's a bunch of different types of loans out there. We're not going to spend much time talking about that at all tonight. But this is the tale of two boats. I want to kind of get you guys ready for what the colleges are doing with their financial aid, with these increased costs, everything that they're doing. And it kind of works like this. So let's say that on the left side you've got students who are in this boat over here. Now, do you remember when we were looking at the slide with a color-coded list? Let's say that these students here are applying to blue and green schools, which means that they are competitive, right? Desirable, however you want to put it. It does not mean that they are the best students in their school. It means that they are, relatively speaking, competitive to the schools they're applying to. Over here you have a group of students who may be looking more towards, or maybe they don't even realize it, they're more towards the middle to the bottom of the pack of the schools they're applying to. All right? So what will happen here, typically what the colleges do is they know that they need to accept a certain amount of students who are in this boat over here. So College A has to take a certain number of students who are in this boat because their academics are superior to what their average is. If they do that, they can then offset the students who are maybe middle of the pack or bottom 25% over here. And the way they'll do that is they will reduce their costs, maybe through some merit-based aid, whereas these students over here will end up full paying. Okay? Everybody understand that? What's going on there? So the key is you have to figure out which boat you're going to be in. It doesn't mean that you have to be in the top 25% for every school that you're applying to, but you probably want to have a few of those on your list. A few of those schools, you want to be in this boat over here. All right? Let me give you some quotes that bring this to light. You can even look these articles up if you'd like. financial aid buying student talent, there's a couple of different iterations of this article that came out. Another pool of students may have no financial need. Nonetheless, we want to buy their talent for our university. They're in the boat on the left. So we use merit aid. We want to buy their talent, right? Sorry. Skipping around on me. If you go further in that article, it says something to the effect of, we will use the available money that we have to create the student body profile that we desire. These are your financial aid officers, not your admissions officers, financial aid. This is what they're doing with the funds that they have. Let me give you some frequently asked questions or things we hear a lot about financial aid. A lot of people believe that financial aid is only available for poor families. That's just not true. It's just not the way it works. What's happened now to a larger extent is need-based aid and merit-based aid is now basically to the colleges one big pool of funds. And when you fill out the FAFSA form, which we're going to talk about in a few minutes, and send it in, what they're using that for is to determine, can they justify giving you any need-based aid? Because that's going to get reimbursed by the state or the feds. If they can't, then it's going to come out of their institutional funds if they want you as a student. Okay? So it's become a very interesting way that they're doing this. My income's too high to qualify, not 100% true. Colleges price themselves to leverage their available financial aid. Income is one of about 72 different factors they use. I can't qualify if I own my home. Home equity. Not necessarily. It depends on where you apply. There are FAFSA, the FAFSA form does not ask about your home equity. It's not part of the criteria. There is another financial aid form, and there's about 400 colleges that ask for that particular form. That one does look at home equity. So they're all over the place on how they do this. But it's not an immediate way to kick you out for qualifying for aid. My students' grades are too low. Need-based aid is not dependent on grades. As a matter of fact, on a FAFSA form, it doesn't even ask about your grades. Debt load will help me. This is really only half the story. Visible assets can derail this approach. The colleges will ask you for a ton of information. The one thing they don't know is your credit. They don't pull your credit, so they don't actually even know what your debt history is or what your debt load is. So don't go out running up a bunch of debt thinking that's going to help your need. That's not how it works. This is an easy process. Anybody, we good? I have a 529 plan. Anybody been doing some college saving using a 529? Few folks. Okay, let me just warn you about this. 529s cover tuition and fees. You cannot use them to pay student loans. All right? The colleges will look at that as a resource. This means you might have a dollar-for-dollar reduction in aid in year 2 and going forward. So if you receive aid on an original form or original award, when they see money coming from the 529, the college has the ability to reduce your aid to make you spend your money first. All right? So that's the one downfall to the way the 529 works. It doesn't mean they're all bad or the way they're set up is all bad. It just means it's something you've got to be aware of.
Quick question.
Yes, sir.
When you're filling out these, your college applications, are you simultaneously filling out financial aid forms to go in with that? So you get, kind of a bulk packet back at the end saying this is what you
That's a
really
good
don't
question.
qualify?
Yeah, we're going to go, in the end, I'll show you how this works. Actually, I'll show you the timeline for how it works so you can see it. But technically, you're filling out the application for admissions to college, and then October 1st is when this FAFSA form goes in, which is technically your application for aid, financial aid. So it's not at the same time, and you don't get information back at the same time either. And all of the colleges send information back at different times, so it can be a little confusing. I'll explain that whole timeline before we're done. This is just a Princeton review. Families who receive the most financial aid are the families who understand how the financial aid system operates. I think that's true of pretty much everything we buy or everything we do. People who know more about taxes generally save on their taxes, right? Same thing here as well. Scholarship winners are not superstars. They're the students who have prepared and invested the time to create applications that highlight their strengths. By the way, when we talk about scholarship and that word is thrown around, that's a little different than the scholarship information you might receive in your email here locally from a guidance counselor. Okay, so don't confuse that. Those scholarships might be more local or national. They're not tied to a college. There's nothing wrong with applying for those. We're talking about the aid and the scholarships that colleges actually rebate to students for attending school there. That's the difference in those. The best strategy is to impress upon the college scholarship committee members that you have a brilliant future. Seems to go without saying, right? So, your FAFSA form is in front of you. Everybody kind of took a peek at that a little bit? Anybody notice the title of that form? What does FAFSA stand for?
Free application for federal student aid.
Free application for federal student aid. Now, federal student aid would be need-based aid, right? We're not talking about need-based aid. I mean, that could be a possibility, but this form is actually the form you have to complete to be basically in the running for any of this institutional aid at the colleges. It doesn't say that anywhere on there, but this is how it works. And I think that's kind of part of the way this system is set up, a little bit. It's confusing. I think it's a little bit misleading. What does this form remind you of as you look through it?
Tax form.
It looks like a tax form, doesn't it? And as a matter of fact, when you fill this out, the colleges actually get a transcript of your taxes to match up your information and make sure you're telling the truth. Now, I think it's kind of similar to the tax system in that we're coming up on April 15th. That's the magic date, right? Where we've got to have our taxes done for 2018, unless you do an extension. And the way that system works is we spend all this time kind of collecting up our information, and maybe you have somebody help you do your taxes or you do them yourself, and you have all these receipts and everything you're keeping home, and you're trying to make sure that you get your tax bill to be what?
Zero.
As low as possible, right? Well, in this case, the colleges ask you for as much information as they possibly can to determine how little they can give you. This is basically, parents, like a financial standardized test. Here's what happens when this form is completed. You complete this form and you submit it, okay? It goes to the Department of Education. The Department of Education, in their infinite wisdom, will send you back something called a SAR report, S-A-R, Student Aid Report. On the Student Aid Report is a number. It's usually a 5-digit number, okay? The number on there has no indication that it means money. But that number actually represents something known as your expected family contribution. Has anybody heard of this before, EFC? Okay, so EFC is a number that's calculated, and the number is generated based on the information that you put on that form. You get the student aid report back. There is nothing on there that tells you this is your EFC, but that's what it is. There's nothing that tells you this is what the colleges are going to see. Expected family contribution is a number that says this is what we think you should be able to afford for college each year. Okay? I will guarantee you this, we have worked with 600 families in the last 10 years. I have never had anybody look at that number and say that they agree with it. Okay? The good news is the colleges know this is a flawed system. It's just data. It doesn't really tell the whole story of the family. And you remember the color-coded list? If you're in the top 25%, the colleges can go way beyond what your EFC says as far as what they're going to do with their financial aid. However, I think, just think about this for a minute. The title, I think, is a bit misleading. And so I think you have a number of families who self-identify and say, well, we don't need to fill this out. We're not going to get need-based aid, and they don't fill it out. Then you have families who will go through and fill it out, but maybe they don't submit it on time, or they submit it late. Remember, this is a first-come, first-served situation. Once the aid is given out, it's done. Then there's a third situation where you might fill it out, you might be ready to turn it in on time, but maybe the information on it's not correct. I'll give you one as a freebie. I think it's somewhere in the neighborhood of questions 89, 90, 91, somewhere in there. And I think that's on the student section still. trying to do this from memory. There was a question on there that asked you for the sum total, something to this effect, of your investable assets. I find it to be strange. This is, I think, if I'm mistaken, tell me, but I think this is in the student section. So the students are supposed to fill out the information about their parents' assets. And it doesn't quite explain what they mean by that there. So a lot of times what happens is parents just total everything up in their head and say, oh, 100, 200, 300, just total everything up and give a number and put it down on the form. The number that they total up might include 401ks and IRAs and things like that. Now those might be invested, but that's not what they're asking you for. In fact, they specifically say do not include that information if you look on page 2. Okay? But when you get to where the actual question is 89 questions later or whatever it is, you forgot what was on page 2 and you just put everything on there. What did you just do to that EFC number? It just went way up. Now, remember we said this is kind of like the tax system. If you make a mistake on your taxes, what happens?
Pay more tax.
Oh, that's it, gross.
You get a nice letter from the IRS, right? Anybody ever gotten one of those? They're really scary when they come in the mail. You're like, oh, what's in here, right? Well, you fix it, you know, you get it taken care of, you file taxes next year, you're good. If you make that mistake the first year, how many years in a row do you think you're going to make that mistake? Because this has to be filled out every year you're in school. So what if you increase your cost by 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 times 4? So this can be a very expensive part of the process. That's why I'm spending a little extra time on this form, because I want you guys, first of all, I want you to fill it out. Secondly, I want to make sure you do it correctly and take your time on it. It's complicated, it's complex. And, but it's a big part of what you have to do. Now, in addition to that, as I mentioned briefly earlier, there are about 400 colleges and universities who think they're special, and they need a form called the CSS Profile, College Scholarship Service Profile Form. So they're going to ask you for this FAFSA form, and they're going to ask you for the profile form, which is another 10 pages of information like this. And they're calculating that EFC figure a little bit differently. I'll give you something else. Here is exactly how you're going to calculate your EFC. Okay? I'm going to put it up here for you. This is what I would call the secret formula for EFC. This is what they're doing. Just give you a minute if you want to take a picture of that. No, that's not what they're doing, obviously. They're taking all that information on the form, right, for EFC. But keep that in mind. Look, if this is EFC from, or FAFSA form from 2012, it hasn't really changed a whole lot. Now pretty much all of it's online, on there. But it can be a very, very expensive and complicated form to complete. It can go in October 1st of senior year. So parents, when you fill this out, you're going to be using information from 2018, your 2018 tax information. That's what's going to go on this form. Okay? You would do well to have that ready to go in. I would suggest the second week of October, because every year when we file these forms, the first week it crashes. This whole system crashes online. It's a mess. So just wait till the second week, they'll have it fixed, and you can send all your information in at that point. The other thing I want to mention also is talk to your CPA. If you want Google, there are some different credits and deductions that are available while your kids are in school. You want to know what those are and make sure that you take advantage of them. I am not a CPA, so I'll just leave it at that. So this is one, if you want to take a picture of it, please feel free to. This is kind of a timeline for putting all this information together that's out there, okay? So junior year or even sophomore year, if you want to start early, I would do some type of career search and aptitude testing. And as I mentioned earlier, take an SAT and ACT, and really it would help you to do a comparison to figure out if you're naturally better at one versus the other. Figure out which one's the smaller boulder to push uphill. And then apply your prep work to that. From there, you can begin your college search. And ultimately, if you notice on that list of schools that was the color code list, you know, there's about 20, 25 schools on that list. If you do criteria selection of colleges properly, you won't end up trying to figure out the 2 or 3 schools you're going to apply to. You should start out with a list of about 25 and be narrowing that list down. That's what a good search would look like. Check the status of your high school path. That's important. Make sure you're on path to graduate. Kind of important. Begin work on a resume. Now, it doesn't sound like that's going on in high school. I'll just give you an example of maybe what a resume would look like, and there's a couple of applications here that you would use. A student resume is something that you would want to submit to college with your application. The resume itself is no longer than one page, maybe single space the information. You don't need to put your academic information on something like this. You need to put on everything like clubs you've been involved in, athletics, awards, community events, things like that, things that you've done. Highlighting those types of things that aren't really going to show in your application. And I would suggest that you put a nice, professionally looking picture of yourself, a headshot, in the top right corner of that resume. We talked about the thank you letters earlier. Thank you letters are something that helps separate you, right? Well, think about if you have a resume like this and you submit it with your application and you have an admissions officer going through a stack of files and up pops your smiling face. When they haven't seen anything like that today or this week or this month. What do you think happens there? You just went the extra mile. They don't even have to really process the information on the resume, do they? You just want them to look and say, hey, I haven't seen this. Maybe you get set on the corner of the desk. The other thing you can do with that resume that's critically important is you are going to have to seek out some people to write some letters of recommendation. And perhaps if you give them something like this, they'll learn more or know more about you. Think of it this way, the people that you know or that you want to have write a letter may not know you as well as you think they do. So give them some information, right? This is another thing you can use that for. So the resume, that's a good one for separating yourself. Begin to search for scholarships, and in that one, that would be related to, as I said, local, national, the type of information that guidance counselors at your school will have. And start your college visits. I mean, there's obviously more you're going to do in junior year, but that's kind of what you want to be looking at. How are we doing so far? Is this helping, guys? Yeah? Okay. So senior year.
Question,
Yes, ma'am.
is it mandatory to do as much college visits?
That's up to you. I think everybody's a little different in how much research they want to do. I don't think there's any substitute for having boots on the ground and visiting a school. Sometimes what will happen is people will visit and get a feel for big school, small school, public, private, that kind of thing. And then maybe there'll be some schools that you end up applying to that you didn't visit. And if you get accepted, maybe you'll go visit then too.
Yeah,
So you kind of break up your visits between junior and senior year. But everybody's a little different. I don't think there's a real, I think it's more important to have a plan of what you're going to do when you're on the visit than how many you take. Let's put it that way. All right. In senior year, finish strong academically, which means if you have the ability to take some more stringent courses, you want to do that. Okay. Maybe take SAT and ACT again, refine your college search. There it is, more visits. September through November is when your applications really need to go in. And I know my team would say if it's November and you're smelling turkey and you don't have all your applications in, that's late. Okay? Really by the end of October you should have them all in. Think of it this way. Where would you like your information to be, your file to be? Do you want it to be in the stack at the very beginning of this process when the admissions officers are kind of fresh? Or do you want to be in the stack that's sitting between them and their Christmas break? Right? Make sure you've got all the information in there that you're supposed to have and none of it that you're not supposed to have. October is when the FAFSA form goes in. December, there are some institutional forms depending on college that you'll need to submit. Now, highlighted is something called award letters. Sir, you were asking about the financial aid and the award letters. This is where the difference comes in. So if you submit your applications in September and October, you're gonna start to get information back all throughout the fall and the winter. There's no set time when schools tell you that you're in. They're all different. When you get your acceptance information back from a college, they're not also going to send you the financial aid information or the award letters. Those come later. Okay? Generally what happens with a college is they accept you and then your information goes to the financial aid office and they determine what your financial aid package is going to look like if you've completed FAFSA. March and April, which is for our seniors right now, that's happening right now. This is award letter season. This is when you actually get the financial aid award letters. So students, you may know where you want to go to school back in September, but what we're suggesting is maybe you suspend your attendance decision until all the information comes in. You have a guaranteed seat until May 1st. Generally, after you decide, that's when you turn in your housing applications and off you go into the future.
The housing applications is the dorm.
What's that?
The housing applications are as part of the dorm.
Yes, correct. Yep. Now, I will just tell you that one thing that the colleges do between, say, November and March is they're going to hammer you with telling you, send in your deposit, turn in your housing application, right? Why are they doing that?
They want to know how many students they have accepted to locked in.
Every time students accept and lock in, that changes what the pool of funds look like that they have to give out, right? It does. This is how they do it. So if you eliminate yourself, you may actually reduce what your reward package could or should look like. In particular, if it's a non-refundable deposit, you have basically just said, I'm in, I'll pay anything. Okay? So just think through that for a minute. That's exactly, here's an example, by the way, of what award letters look like. And just so you guys know I'm fair and unbiased, I have a University of Alabama award letter up there, and I'm a Tennessee guy. So I just want you to see that I could be fair and impartial in dealing with all of this. But just, I want you to see, this might be hard to see right here. It says fall and spring. This is what an award letter is going to look like. Okay? Fall and spring. And what it does is it breaks down, here is, you know, this scholarship, this award, this federal unsubsidized loan, this loan. Boom. There's what your cost is going to be. Sometimes in that letter it will tell you, hey, we're offering you these scholarships, you have to maintain this GPA, blah, blah, blah. That's the award letter. Now, your acceptance letter might even have something that says, congratulations, you're in. Here's a $10,000 scholarship. People oftentimes confuse that as if it's an award. It's not. It's not the award. That generally means that more is coming later. But this is all the way at the end of the process.
We have to wait until December.
March 15th to April 15th is generally high season for award letters. There is also a process of appeal. You can actually take this information if you'd like, and you can appeal to the college for more aid. Did you know that? So there is a formal appeal process that you can go through as well. And sometimes having the information from the other colleges is something you can use to leverage. Remember we said earlier, you want no less than 6, no more than 10 schools. What if your very favorite school was one of those orange schools or yellow schools where you're kind of middle of the pack? Right? And what if a green school that's on your list offers you an award that makes their costs lower than your yellow school? Well, what if you wrote an appeal letter back to the yellow school and said, hey, I really like you guys, but so-and-so school offered this. Would you consider coming down a little bit? They may come back and tell you to pound sand, but at least you know you've got some ammunition, you can go back to them, you're not just begging for more money. Okay? So this is why I'm saying this is a lot like buying a car. It's just a much more protracted process. It takes about 18 months to go through, from now until, say, May of next year. All right, I want to show you one case study I think tonight will kind of bring this home. And the key here, really with all of this, as I said earlier, is there needs to be a good marriage between the student and the family financial situation. And this is not all about just finding the lowest cost school. parents, I think you would probably agree what you're trying to do. You want your student to be happy for the next 4 years. If they're happy and they're in a good place, they're probably going to be more successful. But ultimately, we want to do all that without overpaying for it. Is that right? So this is kind of a case study that will help with all of that. This is what I call the lesser school case study. So what you have is a family, a student applying to 2 different schools, a private college and a state university. On the left side, you've got the private college cost. This is their cost of attendance, $62,000. Now, invariably, if you guys have been looking at colleges, you may kind of look at them and look at the price first off, and that's the number one thing you use to eliminate them, right? I'm going to show you why you might not want to do that. This is not something that's uncommon. This happens a lot. So private college is $62,000 a year. The family's EFC, remember that was calculated using FAFSA, is $15,000 a year. So that means there's a gap here of about $47,000. Now with a lot of your private colleges, they have need formulas. And their need formulas are generally pretty favorable. In this case, this one has what's called a 100% need formula, which means they're going to take this $47,000 and they're going to break it up and they're going to find a way to fill in that need. Now, how badly they want you is how much of that is filled in with loans, okay? But in this example here, the student needed a $7,500 loan. That's what self-help means. Gift aid was $39,500 off the top. So those two together is your $47,000. That means there's no unmet need. If there's unmet need, that's more money that has to come out of your pocket. That's all that means. So between the EFC and the loan, the out-of-pocket is actually $22,500. The state university is half the cost, right? Same EFC, much lower financial needs, so we should be in a better position. But the problem is your state schools, their need formulas are not the same.